Hello, hello, hello. Molly Carmel here. Welcome to What You're Craving. Wow, this is such a wonderful. I'm so glad I said yes when Dear Media asked me if I wanted to do a podcast with them for so many reasons. But wow, I'm just making so many friends and getting such like interesting questions and wonderful feedback and ideas and like it's going exactly. I don't even know if I was hoping it would go here, but this is amazing. So we did a solo podcast a little bit ago about how you move away from diet and into relationship, how I did it and how one can do it and many people do it. And and so I got some really interesting feedback about that, which was and I love me a compliment. You're amazing. But I have to be honest, like people challenging me is wonderful too. Like, what a great opportunity to really take stock and think about the answers. And especially when that's in the service of helping other people find freedom. Woohoo, let's do it. So, here was the big question from that podcast, which is um, so you say you're anti diet, but you have eliminated an entire food group, sugar. And if we're being honest, I don't eat flour either because ground up flour is sugar. It's sugar sister from another mister. And how is that not a diet? Like literally, how is eliminating a food group not like an obsessional diet? And I think it's a really, really great question. And one that I really wanted to talk about today, which is how is it that you can break up with sugar and be anti-diet? Because I think what's been promoted when it comes to sugar is this really like restrictive, like food addiction in general, really restrictive, weighing and measuring, bringing your scale places, like things I had zero interest in ever. I I'm like very much about. You can tell this about me if you listen. I'm very much about like having a lot of fun and living a really really fun life, and especially as somebody who lost a lot of years to addiction. I mean, I lost a lot of years of my life to my eating disorder and my addiction. So I'm very much about getting, not necessarily getting that time back, but certainly appreciating every little minute that I have in this life that I've lived, which really brings me to the topic today. So just a real quick, Reader's Digest version of, me, which is that, first of all, I need to say, before I recognized how toxic, abusive, overwhelming, creating overwhelming hopelessness in my life diets were, I was like, I loved a diet because I was like hook, line, and sinker. Like, I mean, I was like their dream. Like, I'm like, yes, 15 pounds in 15 days. Yes, let me take that pill. Like, yes, let me sign up for this. Like, you know, I felt like I was inherently broken. And the way that things were advertised to me, I was like, yeah, like I'm broken, fix me. Like, yeah, I'm totally screwed up. Like, heal, fix me. And I'm the problem. And so I really bought into all of it and really, really bought into diet culture in, hating my body, hating the way it looked, wanting to conform, wanting to look the way everyone else looked, And boy, I always think about, when I moved from California, my father died when I was 3, and my mother and I moved to the suburbs of New York, Westchester County, when I was 5, and I was like, this little like short, like, not short, but I was like this little like fat kid with like an afro, like big curly, unmanageable curly hair, with like a dead dad and like no siblings. And it was like, I just walked into the situation and it was like so clear that I didn't belong, and I knew it internally. And I was really like, so I think you know, when I thought like, oh, my weight can solve this problem. If I can just get skinny, then I will belong with everybody. When I just get skinny, then I'll I'll have the things that everyone else has. I'll feel like I belong. I really thought that that was going to solve all of my problems. And the way it is in addiction, that what we think is going to solve the problem is often the problem, right? Like I literally thought that dieting that the perfect weight would be the solution to my problems, that the perfect and in fact, the seeking of that is what caused me so many of my problems, and sugar as well. So anyway, I loved to diet. I loved the idea of there like being something that solved me or fixed me because I was so broken, which by the way, I believe none of that today. Big lies. Big lies. No, no, no. I'm amazing. So are you. So when it came to the point, and by the way, this is after so much diet drama and trauma. I need to like fast forward through 20 years of every diet, every intervention, every therapist, every ashram, every doctor, every, gastric bypass, ate through that. I mean, you name it. And, never really thinking of the endocrine part, like never really thinking of my endocrine system, never really thinking of metabolic syndrome, prediabetes, never, and being an eating disorder therapist, just in the service of that, just reminding us there's so many blind spots that this thing comes with so much denial. That's reinforced, by diet culture also. And, it came to the point where I was like, my brother had given up sugar and I was like, okay. And I was gaining weight hand over fist. And I was so scared because I was just this eating disorders therapist, like living this lie, gaining weight hand over fist. I was like out of ideas, and sugar was like the last house on the block and I didn't want to live there, but it was the only place to live. And I was like, all right, I'll try this. I tried it in fairness. I need to tell you this. I tried giving up sugar as a diet. Like I wanted a quick fix, bippity boppity boo, heal me, get this weight off so I can go back to being the way that I want to be, which is, eating what I want when I want. Really, really deeply embedded. So the things that I was embedded in, right, is that I wanted something to fix me. I wanted an endpoint. I wanted to eat what I want when I wanted, you know, and I really wasn't sort of willing to create a new relationship with food. That wasn't something that had occurred to me. So the two things that happened when I gave up sugar, when I broke up with sugar, which for those of I wasn't intending to be 12 years and not have sugar. That was not my point. That was not the plan, but my plan and the plan are usually really different. And the plan is much better than my plan. But when I gave up sugar, two things happened. The first thing that happened was that I had some pretty serious withdrawal and I was an addictions therapist. And I was like, this is like substance. Like I'm having a reaction consistent with substance. And then I knew this stuff about the endocrine system. So I was like, okay, I think I might have to take this sugar thing a little bit more seriously. But I got to be honest, that wouldn't have been enough. Like, so what? Like, so what? So what? You have detox. Like, I hated myself so much at that time. I would have been fine to go in and out of detox. Like, there was no sense that I was worthy of, having freedom from food. That wasn't even like a concept. I was so stuck in the cycle of dieting and not enoughness that comes with dieting and the failure of dieting that reinforces the not enoughness. I hope you're nodding your head and not just thinking I'm a loon. I know you're nodding your head. This is the con. This is how they keep us stuck. You're not enough to do this diet. There's an end point. You go back to the old way. It's never, the end game that I believe works, which is, this is a relationship. You're going to grow. You're going to change. It's going to grow. It's going to change. They will be, your relationship with food is so linked to your relationship with yourself. So anyway, the second thing that happened, which I think is, knowing the research of how we change is far more important, is my life just started getting better. Like I stopped having cravings for foods. Like I started being able to like feel full, which was never I'm a volume girl through and through. It's like, and I would start feeling fullness. And I was like, what is going on? This is like a miracle, And like my mood changed and my sleep changed and my cravings changed. And like so many things started changing that's really what kept me in. What kept me in, and it took a minute, unfortunately, it wasn't like 3 days in, or it wasn't even 30 days in. It was probably closer to 90 or 120 days in. And I think kind of luckily for me, I had a little bit of weight to release. Like I had like 50 or 60 pounds I needed to release. And so it was like, honestly, like while I was like waiting that out and knowing that this was kind of working, all these really wonderful things were happening. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. The other thing I want to say, which, I'll get to in this, is that while I was doing this, I was doing it imperfectly. And, there's this moment where I like took this like handful M&Ms off of my secretary's desk, or secretary at the eating disorder clinic I was working at, and I stuffed them down my throat, and obviously being the little like destination dieter I was like, oh great, I'm done. I screwed up the whole thing. And I don't know how this happened, but something in my head, it was a nutritionist I had seen, was like, Molly, your issue, your abusive issue with food did not go down on a handful of M&Ms. Stop what you're doing, go back to work, eat lunch when it's time to eat lunch. And it was like, it was such an aha moment. It was like, you can be stuffing M&Ms down your throat at 10:30 in the morning and be doing something and be making a totally different choice at 10:31, you know? And so I think that there's a piece of, getting out of diet culture that is first like embracing imperfection, which is its own podcast and one that we definitely have scheduled. So stay tuned. But to be honest, the other thing that happened was that, like, I really started healing biochemically, and I really started, my endocrine system started healing. And that was the first moment that I could do the emotional work that I really wanted to do. And I mean, I say needed to do in a very like, none of us needs to do the emotional work, but I knew it was like intended for me. So I was like, this is the first time I can see my life with clarity and see where I want to change it and see where I want to grow and see where I want to change. And like, I was right for that opportunity. And there was a lot of work to do. There's a lot of healing that I had to do. And that healing was actually underneath this abusive relationship that I had with food that I would have sworn to you is not abusive, because I was also raised in that like low fat, fat free, the snack wells, the fat free brownies of it all. So I had a lot of like untangling in my brain to do. But the effects are so profound to me. And and listen, I'm not just, I mean, of course I'm talking about me because that's like, it's my podcast and that's what I know. But since then, I've treated thousands and thousands of people who will tell you that this is their experience too. And so I'm very, just like a side note, like I'm very, very cautious of people who only speak anecdotally. Like I would be there, because this diet world and this wellness world and this, it's full of people with anecdotes, and anecdotes are great, but anecdotes plus evidence plus training is really like key in this field. So anyway, just I want to say this has not only been my experience, but the experience of thousands of people that I've treated. I have colleagues and their clients have had experiences like this. EIEIO. So there's a lot of people who are saying, gosh, isn't this an eating disorder on its own? This elimination of sugar and flour. And I like to be very frank with you, like, no, quite the opposite. Sugar and flour is what really was at the root of my eating disorder. I was on Instagram the other day, and there was it was a nutritionist, and she was saying, is it your mother? Is it your ex-boyfriend? Or is it something else that caused your eating disorder? I very rarely reply to things like this. It just got me so heated. And I wrote, do you really think that it's only one thing that causes an eating disorder? Is that, I find that, I mean, not do I find that hard to believe. I'm just trained to know that there's not one thing that causes anything, right? It's usually a pretty perfect storm of, biology, environment, and substance, and there's lots of research on what's happened to food, and since the 1820s, now that we're in the 2020s, that really suggests its addictive quality. And so, and in fairness, I have the, I happen to have the makeup of somebody who has a pretty good chance of addiction, and an eating disorder, right? I have a big, gigantic family tree full of addiction. You shake my family tree, there's bottles and gambling debts and lots of pill bottles and all sorts of things that come out of my family tree. I come from a long line of addicts. I have very significant trauma in my history. Um, and I'm a highly sensitive person, like on a good day, and I was born that way. And so and then of course, like I have, I mean, in the response to that, yes, I had lots of traumatic events that really supported diet culture. I had people making fun of my weight. I got fired for being overweight. I mean, lots of things that would spark an eating disorder. Just side note, I want to say, I don't think that there's ever one thing that causes anything. That's just not where my training lives, or the training or the research lives. So I do not think that giving up sugar and flour causes an eating disorder. I just want to asterisk that because, I think if you come from more of a restriction background, like this may not be the thing for you. So this is like sort of the tricky part of the food world, right? I've actually seen anorexics and orthorexics in inpatient treatment be treated with a no sugar, no flour model. And it's the first time they've ever found freedom. I've also seen anorexics and orthorexics do so well with an intuitive eating model. So, I mean, I think the thing is you're listening to this, like take a breath. If I'm really, getting you all riled up, take a breath, you know? Take what you want and leave the rest because the truth is on eating disorders, the evidence base is just not so great on anything, like there's a lot of different models that work for a lot of people. I think that sugar addiction is getting a bad rap and may actually not be helping people it needs to help, which is why I'm sort of screaming from the rafters about it. But I also think diet culture is preventing all of us from getting into a relationship with food. So it's like, geez, I just want to scream about so many things. But let me try to stay on topic today in our nice little podcast together. So for me, and for lots of people I know, it's actually sugar and flour that's causing the eating disorder in many ways, right? It's hijacking the nervous system, it's hijacking the endocrine system. You can't feel full, you're craving more. We're eating foods that are being designed to make us want more. We're constantly bombarded with, emotions that support food, fixing the feeling, you name it. And so eliminating it for me, and I want to say imperfectly, um, is actually gave me the first moment of remission from my eating disorder. And in that remission is where I started to be able to do the relationship work with food and with myself that gives me a life that I love, you know, where I can feel love and I can have beautiful relationships and do brave things and get to help people. So here's why I'm anti-diet. I mean, I guess there's a lot of people that are pro-diet, but here's why I'm anti-diet. Diets are not sustainable. They are not long-term. They are short. They are quick fix. They are, easy and fast promises. And I've never, ever, ever in over 20 years of being an eating disorders therapist, seen one that works forever. And the cost of them is high, right? Going on one and failing comes at a high cost, especially with repetition, right? Many diet failures usually, I'd say almost always, causes this belief that you can't do it, you're not worth it, you're no good, and so it wreaks havoc on the spirit, which I actually think, and let me tell you something, diets wreak havoc on the body and the mind, but I actually think chronic diet failure wreaks greatest havoc on the soul. And that is just like not okay. The other thing that diet culture, why I'm anti-diet is because it's super restrictive, right? And restriction leads to binging, and that cycle is never ending, never ending. It is like they say in Vegas, the house always wins. Restriction always leads to binging. This is in my career, it's like the amount of times that I have looked at someone's food and it has been the most, I'd say, this is so diety, and they'll say, what? I'm just here to lose weight. And I'm like, house always wins. Every restriction leads to a binge. We got to add food immediately, right? Because there's a part of it where you have to feel satisfied. And I can talk about what that means another day. There's so much to talk about in this. But the house always wins. Every 1,200 calorie diet, every 800 metafast diet ends in a binge. Maybe not the day after, but it ends in a binge. Just watch. And here's the other one. I mean, here's the third reason why I'm anti-diet. You never, ever, ever get to know yourself. You never get to tap in to your intuition. You never get to tap into who you are and what you know and what you like and what you don't like. I never knew I liked olives because I was so anti-fat for so long, and they were just fat. They were bad, And God, and I remember I was out with someone and they said, "Do you like olives?" And I said, "No." And they said, "Why?" And I said, "I don't know." And then I ate one. And I was like, "These are delicious." But I mean, this is what life is about, right? Learning what we love and we don't love, and opening our hearts and opening our minds. Because I do believe that knowing that I love olives makes me open-minded to a lot of other things in life and a lot of other people and a lot of other ideas. 1 plus 1 is 5. And like not being able to tap into your intuition never lets you create a relationship with food. You're always stuck in this, you know, you're always stuck in this, I'm good, I'm bad, I'm right, I'm wrong, my weight is good, my weight means that, like, it's so messy. It's so centered, like it's self-centered. And I mean this actually like in the definitional term of self-centered. It makes your world so small. It makes my world so small. It is, there's nothing to think about, but if you're being good, if you're being bad, if your weight means that you're good enough or bad enough, like it is so, it doesn't allow for you to think about the important things in life, like love, like service, like faith, like who you want to be, like who you want to help, like what you want to do, like what's your purpose, like these things that really matter. Food and dieting, like dieting especially, steals from it. Total thief. No space to grow, no space to evolve, no space to know yourself. Diet is a thief. So I think the other thing, what people really misunderstand about breaking up with sugar and flour is that people say, oh, it's unsustainable. I can never, ever, ever, what if I go to, what if I go to a wedding and they're passing around cake? And it's like, yeah, like what if you're an alcoholic and you're at a wedding and they're passing around champagne? Like it's very much the same thing. Like certainly we all have to eat, but none of us have to eat cake. If the end game of us eating cake is obsession and thinking about it too much and revving up the nervous system and revving up the endocrine system, like it's not necessary. So it's very sustainable actually. So people like it's unsustainable. Like I don't agree with that at all. I haven't had sugar or flour for 12 years. And I know people who haven't had it for longer. I have friends who have them 30 years. People say it's overly restrictive. I wouldn't say that at all. I was out to dinner with with a friend and she said, well, do you eat cheese? She has to make all these things at me. And I was like, listen, effectively, I have an allergy. I think I have an allergy to sugar and flour. Like I don't eat it like by choice, but if I don't eat sugar and flour, I eat everything else. Like I don't restrict anything else because that feels restrictive. Eating higher fat foods or more savory foods, like I don't have time for that. I don't think it's overly restrictive at all. Quite the opposite. And the other thing that people, and I get it, like there are people get very passionate about, they get really passionate about intuitive eating and they think everybody should do intuitive eating. And people get really passionate about food addiction. They think everybody should do food addiction. If you learned anything from me in the time that we've known each other, it probably is this, right? Somebody tells you that there's one way, run away. Nothing's the solution for everyone. And in fact, I have this beautiful Facebook group and we've had it for about a year and a half now of people who are broken up with sugar and everybody kind of does it differently. And it's awesome because biodiversity, like we're all different snowflakes. So I don't think I think the programs all look really similar, but they're not the same, and I think as you grow and evolve in a relationship with food, because I really believe like, a lot of times we need like some supervision. We need like a chaperone when we're first learning how to re-eat. If we've been in a really abusive relationship, you need some therapy, you need some chaperoning, you need some guidelines. I'm a big fan of that. But then I think as time goes on, you don't really need your escort anymore. And you start to create your own relationship with food that's like so cool. And and you do it imperfectly. And then you learn self-forgiveness. Like it's a dream. It's really a dream if you can make it that way. But a lot of that means you have to get anti-diet because so much of what interferes with us creating a healthy relationship with food, and especially if you're in an abusive relationship with sugar, so much of it's actually not the sugar that prevents you getting into a healthy relationship with food. It's your belief about dieting, right? It's your belief about making mistakes. It's your belief. It's like that addiction to perfectionism, which is, an endless addiction. There's literally like the way you can guarantee a miserable life is to be a perfectionist, period. And the other thing, my loves, is like, it's not a diet because it's an addiction for many of us. And like, there are physical ramifications of, going off this diet, quote unquote, like it's a big deal to many. and if you're listening and like it may be the sugar. Like I have seen miracles happen from people who actually aren't even eating disordered. They're just food addicted and they break up with sugar and they're like, "Oh my God, I'm good." I've seen it a lot of times in my office. I'm usually very jealous of those people because I'm both food addicted and eating disordered. So it was like very emotional and very physical for me. But yeah, it's pretty amazing. So, here's the deal. Breaking up with sugar, there's not necessarily guidelines. There's support. There's like, if you're really having a hard time, there's lots of suggestions on how to do it and, where to go. And, I think support is like not just me, but, the opposite of addiction is connection and, getting help and guidelines, I think is really useful, but there's no guidelines to it. There's just a lot of people and professionals that can help, you know, and I think the thing is, maybe most important is that we're always going to be in a relationship with food, right? Like things are not always going to be the same in your relationship with food. The program, or I wouldn't say it that way. I actually want to delete the program. But the relationship that I'm in with food today is so different than the one I was in the first 6 weeks of breaking up with sugar, in the first 6 months, and even in the first 6 years. Like, I couldn't trust myself until I'm a slow learner. I couldn't trust myself till like year 5. I mean, truly, I couldn't even add, I couldn't add foods that I have in today that like bring me so much joy. Like food, I love my food. And I'm able to love my food because it doesn't have sugar and flour in it, because it doesn't, trigger me. And it's just a wonderful way to live, and just in conclusion, can I just say this thing? Like, yeah, I guess you can take breaking up a sugar to a real extreme. And diet culture freaking loves that. Diet culture loves extremes because, they benefit financially off the extremes because there's always an endpoint to extremes. Or there's a delusion in extremes that you never have to face your truth. And you have every right to that. Usually people are not listening to my podcast that are avoiding truth because that's like my love language, real truth and honesty. But the truth is, like, taking anything in extremes is dangerous, you know? Either we're striving for perfection, which is so dangerous, and it's such a thief, or we're not taking care of our bodies, right? We're like, "Forget it, I'm never going on a diet again. I'm just gonna eat whatever I want for the rest of my days," and that's not healthy, given depending what you're putting on your body in your body. Or we're going extreme on, bulimic exercise and 1,200 calorie diets and being like so hyper vigilant about like what time it is and what time we're eating. And like, that's not healthy either. Right. And so I have to say, like, breaking up a sugar for me is the anti diet. It's the first time in my life, and I said this in the last solo pod. Someone said to me, your weight is none of your business and your body is none of your business. That was their anti diet. And I looked at them like, you can go F yourself. All of that is my business. That's the only thing that matters to me. And through the years of breaking up with sugar and finding this is the first time I finally got it. It's because my life is more than that. That's what it is. My weight's none of my business because if I'm taking care of my body, then my weight is just my weight. If I'm doing loving things to my body and taking care of it and mind, body, and soul, not just like through my food, right? Through how I'm attending to my soul, how I'm attending to my emotions, how I'm attending to my relationships. Like it's all included because there's actually only 2 relationships you have to have in this world. One is with food and one is with yourself. So listen, maybe it's the sugar, maybe it's not. And if it isn't, I hope you learned something today because there's a lot to learn in this anti-diet stuff. There's a lot to learn in this like getting rid of diet culture stuff. It is so embedded in us. It's absolutely amazing. I'll tell you a story next time about it. It's never ending. It's pretty amazing how infused so many of our minds. It's just bonkers. But listen, you are worth having a healthy relationship with food. You are worth getting to know yourself. You are worth growing and evolving. And for some of us, the thing that's blocking that is actually the sugar. So listen, there's great quizzes to do that with. There's a Yale food addiction scale in my book, Breaking Up with Sugar. There are 2 pretty awesome quizzes in chapter 4. There's a lot of evidence-based ways that you can figure that out. We'll link the Yale food addiction scale to this podcast. That's free. And the Breaking Up with Sugar is in the book, but it's a really good book if you want to get it. If you don't, I love you no matter what. And I do love you no matter what. So anyway, I will talk to you really soon. Thank you so much for listening today and sending you lots of love.